I wish I could say I've only heard that with you guys, but if I had $1 for every time that one came up, let's just say I'd have a lot of dollars. So I guess, is that a controllable or uncontrollable thing?
Both.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of boths in this discussion. I guess, how could it be both?
Either have too much or not enough.
So you said you either have enough or not enough. What did you say?
Finding skilled labor these days, especially willing to work at night.
Work at night. There's a statistic, and this actually is a survey that kind of floats around from time to time. But USA Today, some of the big magazines and newspapers have done top jobs in the country. The top 10, God bless you, the top 10 are what you usually expect, you know, doctor, lawyer, blah, blah, blah. Pretty easy list. Construction worker. On a list of 250, does anyone guess where a construction worker falls?
What do you mean?
238.
It's right around 245. Now, it's usually below migrant farm worker. Yeah, interesting story, huh? Now, I could go on and on and on, and I know Mike Rowe from the world of dirty jobs has spent a lot of time with a lot of the different state legislators. I believe Georgia is one of his areas that he's focused. If you don't know Mike Rowe, he's the guy that does is it Ford? I think it's Ford or Chevy, either way. Ford. And he does dirty jobs on Discovery Channel, or did, I should say. And when he wasn't picking up animal carcasses, he was doing construction jobs. And his, kind of the focus of his talks have always been focus on the trades. Stop pushing people to go to college. And I'm going to say something that's pretty controversial, but I think I'm right. There are a lot of people that go to college that have zero reason for going to college. They should not be there. They should be with us in the world of construction. However, I'm going to ask you guys, anyone in here have a teenage daughter right now? Anybody? Okay. Your daughter comes home today and says, Dad, I've got outstanding news today. We had a career fair at school today, and we had folks from Home Depot and Coca-Cola was there, and I can't think of any other companies from Atlanta off the top of my head. Oh, and we had a bunch of colleges too, Georgia Tech and UGA, and those guys in Auburn for whatever reason. But I decided that, Dad, I made the decision, I'm going to go hang drywall for a living. What does Dad say?
Unacceptable.
Unacceptable. You played. I'll give you your money later. So, what was your daughter going to do? My daughter's not going to go do that hanging drywall stuff. Where is my daughter going? Answer the question. College. A lawyer. It's funny, I did this, I was telling my sister about this. Yeah, ask Darcy if that worked out. I asked my sister this, and it was funny because my sister, I have a niece and nephew. They're only a little bit younger than me, actually. I'm the youngest of a couple kids, so my nieces and nephew are about my same age, and I know Kenneth and Caitlin, when they went to college, they went to Sacred Heart University, which is a small private Catholic school up in Connecticut. When I say all those things, what immediately pops in your head?
Money, expensive. Big
money. Private Catholic University in Connecticut. Most expensive. To the tune, my nephew, who was a B student, and he's a smart kid, but B student at best in high school, he went to this private school, and he went to Sacred Heart, racked up a $125,000 student loan for a bachelor's degree, not a law degree, a bachelor's degree in business. This is not a knock on business graduates or anything like that, but what my nephew is doing now is probably even more profound. Does anyone know what industry my nephew works in right now?
Drywall.
He's in construction. And the thing is, my nephew, there is kind of the gene pool in my family where my nephew got it. Even though I'm in construction, I am a horrible carpenter. I just don't have that gift. My nephew is actually a very good carpenter, and he's phenomenal. He's meticulous, he's clean, he does it all right, and he's more what I would consider residential, commercial grade cabinetry work, not necessarily hanging drywall or studs and things like that, albeit he can do it. My point is, did he need that $120,000 student loan hanging around his neck like an anchor? And my sister and I have debated this over and over again, you know, and of course she's going to defend her kids and I'm just that schmuck, but I'm like, he doesn't need it. No, you don't understand the valuable lessons he learned. I know what the valuable lesson he learned. It's called a student loan, and why not? Now, our industry has not done a great job of selling itself, though. By the way, can you make a great living in construction?
Yes.
Absolutely. Do you do rewarding work?
Yes.
Yes. And I'm sure a lot of you are like me. Sitting behind a desk all day is sometimes probably pain and agony for some of you. You like being out in the elements. Yeah, we'll complain it's hot in Atlanta or wherever you're working, but let's be honest. You like to see things get done. And sitting behind like a desk, even sitting today is probably like kryptonite for some of you. My point is, why is it when we go out, I've had other folks like this gentleman say, no, and I know you were maybe play acting, but the idea when I ask superintendents, no kid of mine is going in this business. Wait a second, you just told me a second ago it's a good business to be in, you make good money, you make good wages, you do rewarding work, but you just said your kid, you wouldn't want them to come in this business? It's kind of hypocritical to some extent, but look at what we do, and it's a rewarding business, but it's also challenging. You know, I mentioned my Russian friends earlier, and when I asked them about the workforce, I asked them about their workforce. And I said, Greg, our workforce, unfortunately, and I didn't take offense at this, albeit I probably should have, he said, our workforce is like you Americans. You know, you guys they all want to play PlayStation and Xbox. No one wants to go out and work anymore. They all want cushy job, you know, and I said, okay, I guess I'm not offended. He goes, you know, we bring in immigrant labor for Moscow projects, and their immigrant labor is a little bit different than ours per se. Theirs is all kind of that Middle Eastern, you know, Kazakhstan and Shamakistan and Kirplakistan and all that. But they said, you know, they don't view it as dirty jobs. The moral of the story is, this is something, can we control it? Yes and no. We work in a challenging environment, but are we the best cheerleaders out there espousing the construction environment? Are we out there saying, hey, construction is a great place to be? I see Darcy and your team at different trade schools saying this is a good place to be, not only bedding, but construction. This is bigger than bedding, folks, a lot bigger than bedding. And this is going to take AGC, ABC, NECA, SMACNA, I don't know, throw another couple alphabet soup in there to make this problem go away. But until we get away from construction being at 245, we're going to continually have this problem. To give you, for instance, we did this program. I had a bunch of senior executives in a room, and I put a bunch of newspaper clippings up on the screen. And the newspaper clippings on the cover said, employment crisis in construction. Construction can't find workers. Construction workers in a deficit. It was like just like a smattering, like a poster board full of all these clippings. And all the CEOs in the room, I said, look at that up there on the board. And they said, yeah, that's the problem we got. That's it right there. I said, I'm glad you said that, because do you know when these newspaper clippings were cut? And everyone kind of shut up for a second. 1985. That's how long we've been talking about this problem. And I could probably even say we've been talking about it longer than that. But the moral of the story was, for almost 30 years, 30 plus years, we've been lamenting, we can't find good people. Well, shut up and do something about it. Stop complaining about construction and not selling it. I'm not saying anyone here is doing that, but we gotta sell it, that this is a great business to be in. Is it hard work? Hell yeah. Is there a certain level of entitlement with younger folks today? I'm sure. But selling the good stuff and not focusing on the bad, not looking like Herbert. You know, could you imagine we're out there, we're building a job and everyone's standing around looking disorganized, you know, they don't look like they got their act together, and we're saying, here, come be part of our organization. It's like, oh God, yeah, that's horrible. No, I'm good. I'll go work in a cushy office environment or sell cell phones for a living. Anyway, not knocking any cell phone salesmen. So what's another challenge we have in the business? Technology. Controllable or uncontrollable?
Both.
User dependency.
There's a training element to this. So now let's ask the $1,000,000 question. Good or bad?
Both, because we become lazy.
It's both. Once again, I do think we were talking at the break about how we've become so dependent on our cell phones. We talked about the Nextel generation. My older friends in the room remember the Nextels. You know, doop, doop. We chirp everybody, and like, why bother planning when I can just chirp them? Well, today's chirping is what? Instant messaging or texting. You know, why bother actually getting someone on the phone when I can just text them? It's a much easier that way. The problem is, does that create bad behavior? And the answer is yes. But the adage here is, don't blame the device, blame the behavior. You know, there are plenty of bad things in this world, but, you know, does that necessarily mean I have to do those bad behaviors? We can kind of get ourselves caught in that trap. But I would say technology, hopefully, might also be the thing that helps with the #1 item you listed on the board. For instance, I want to paint a picture for you. Let's say 5-10 years from now, the construction site looks a lot different than it does today. You've got a job site trailer, but this job site trailer has a lot of computer screens. So you've probably seen those movies that have like Swordfish, if you remember that movie with Halle Berry. I think some of you probably just remember Halle Berry's part of that movie, but you got the big screen. There were all those computer monitors. They were hackers or something like that. But now our job site has all these monitors up. Those monitors are all controlling autonomous vehicles on the job site. So if you're doing a heavy civil project, you've got excavators that are working without operators now. It's more like that one person is controlling all of this equipment through those monitors.
That is not industry standard.
Slow down. Let me finish the
Not
story.
yet. That is not industry standard.
Well, right, 5 to 10 years from now. But let me finish the story because I want to continue to paint the picture. On this wall, you also have monitors. Did anyone, you can tell I watch a lot of movies too. Ever see the movie Aliens, where they had like the different EKG readings for the Marines? And it showed when a guy died and got eaten by an alien, it showed like his line flatlined because they had all those sensors that were connected to their armor or something. Well, you got a wall that has those kind of EKG, heartbeat sensors, blood pressure sensors, whatever you might. You also have deliveries showing up in autonomous vehicles, drones kind of capturing this whole thing. You know, you're probably thinking, boy, that Greg sounds a little bit like science fiction. It's actually a lot sooner than you think. There are companies out there that are making massive, massive investments in wearable technologies, and the wearables are sensors that monitor your blood pressure to make sure you're not overheating. You know, God forbid I can look and see that guy's body temperature is 102 degrees and his heart rate is going through the roof. Let's get him out of that hole. But also, the idea of the amount of money that's being pumped into autonomous vehicles, using drone she's going to be a volunteer. No. All of these things sound like science fiction, but folks, your customers are saying, can you imagine Amazon, how much growth Amazon has? And for whether you like them or don't like them is irrelevant. The fact is they're out there. And they have millions of square foot of facilities throughout the country that does this distribution. And you're in the business that's building stuff for Amazon. And you got to tell Jeff Bezos, hey, we can't do your project and meet your schedule because we just don't have people. How many people work in an Amazon facility? Hardly any. They go, I don't really get it. Why do you need human beings? Now, I know what you're saying. What is this, like Terminator and the Rise of the Machines? Folks, if we can figure ways to use different people in a different way that makes us maybe more attractive to an industry, leverages technology, are we going to have robots out there building walls and being our trade contractors? Doubtful. Maybe not in my lifetime. But the point is, we are moving in a direction and embracing some of this, but it also comes back to, are we going to train people the right way? Or we're going to use these devices and processes in the right way? And even if you had it, Do you have the Benning way to structure it appropriately? You know, at this point, let's just focus on texting the right things. Let's use email correctly. Let's use our drawings and our digital files the right way. Let's get to the kind of, you said the pre-K, let's do pre-K and graduate from that class first before we talk about the Star Trek stuff. But this is a thing that's also affected our industry. Why do young people not want to come in construction? Is it the work ethic? Possibly. Is it because we're still doing things the way we've always done them? That could be it too. Why aren't we being more, could be money. But we also said you can make good money in this business, can't you?
You have to do the time.
You gotta do the time.
Yeah, they think they need to start making $100,000 right straight out of.
You can't? No. No, the answer is I agree. There's a certain amount of, we use the word entitlement. You know, I'm here today, I've been here for 2 weeks, can I make $1 million? The answer is no, you gotta earn it. On the other hand, that's on them, but what about us? What are we doing to kind of provide this environment? It's, once again, this is middle ground we're talking about. I can't control their work ethic. What I can control is how we approach the industry. What else? Give me another one, folks.
Well, kind of in line with that workforce effect. It's a change, but it's also been good, is we've gone a lot more to everything subbed out, no self-performing.
I don't know if that was a good thing.
So it's both.
I'm saying that, I don't know if it is or not, but I'm just saying that changed to where that. Just.
You want me to tell you the answer to this? The pyramids were built with what's called the master builder concept. The master builder concept was, and there are only a few master builders in America right now. You might say, well, pyramids to America, that's a long time. Thing is, there wasn't subcontractors. They didn't have a plumbing subcontractor build the pyramid. You know, they didn't have a drywaller. They had a group of people that built it. They designed it, built it. There are folks in this country, Chinbro, they're a company up in Maine. They have close to 2,500 people on their staff. They self-perform 90% of the work, sub out about 10. Kiewit, I'm sure we've all probably heard of Kiewit. You know, they're another one. They do mega civil projects. They self-perform everything. They don't have a lot of trade contractor support. Now, the good news is they control a lot of their processes. They control their projects. The bad news is you got to feed the beast. If you're going to have 2,000 people on the payroll, you better have a lot of work in front of them at all times to gobble up. So that's one of the challenges. So what happened as a business model, they evolved, said, you know, we really can't keep 2,000 people active because we're going to have some, you know, things like this in the economy. So let's kind of sub it out. Sub it out, you shed some of that risk, but you inherit some risk because now you're subject to that, you know, how those folks, you know, perform or don't perform. The answer is, we see this at FMI in the industry all the time. Companies will start to go, you know what? What if we did the concrete work on all Benning projects? What if we tried that out? So we start a business unit called Benning Concrete, and Benning Concrete does all our slabs. Then they start doing work for other general contractors, and pretty soon Benning Concrete is its own business. And then we go, all right, we're now back to where we started. So we see this all the time. Is it a risk? Is it a good thing, a bad thing? It just depends. But then you're also needing more labor, which goes back to what my friend back there said, which is, well, now I got to find skilled labor to do that type of work. So it is a challenge. Give me another item. Knowledge. What do you mean by knowledge?
Well, that would tie them all together. You don't want to put the cart in front of the mule. I mean, if you got subcontractors, they only care about themselves. They don't give a crap about the guy coming behind them.
Right. Yeah, the drywaller is kind of like, look, I just want to get this to a point and let the painter sort it out. Or let Benning sort it out because you're getting paid the big bucks, right? That's a huge thing. Are we sharing this institutionally? It goes back to even just down to what you guys know about the trades themselves. You know, a lot of you have been doing this for a long time and know those kind of hiccups or rocks in the road, what to look for when a tiling company comes in and do all the vinyl tile or epoxy floors or whatever it is. the glass and glazing, the movie theater seats. You know what to look for. However, if you're not making the guy sitting next to you smarter, and we're not using this to kind of go, hey, when you get the movie theater equipment set up, you better think about X, Y, and Z. But if it's just in your head, and we're not sharing that, once again, a shame on us. There's a lot of knowledge. Are we leveraging technology? I mean, you're starting to see a story that I'm developing here. They're all webbed together. It's not an easy, you solve this, you just kind of get over the hump there. Give me another item.
Demand for the work over the quality of the work.
What do you mean by that?
So if demand's up, they try to get it as fast as they can, done as quick as they can, move on to the next job. So sometimes it affects the quality of what they're doing.
When you say the who, are you talking the subcontractors?
Sometimes it could be us.
Yeah, you exchange, it's that old three-legged stool discussion. Do you want it safe, quality, or schedule? You pick the three or the two, and
Yeah.
I forget the phrase, but the idea, you can't have it all three ways. That brings another question. What about, I'll add one to your list. Has that changed dramatically?
Yes.
Yes.
For the good or for the bad?
Good.
Good.
For the good. So, to tell this
I
story,
don't know, both.
in what way? Why is it both?
Huh? In some ways, they are controlling safety to a point to where people have no responsibility for their own selves.
It's a good point. Depending on how it's educated or taught in, it's like you've got to have, you can't show up drunk, I mean, we can only institute a certain amount of things, but I get that.
What?
What's that?
Can't show up drunk?
I know, I'm trying, but no. Just Starbucks. No, that's a good point. There is a personal accountability piece to this. However, in 1972, and I don't know if we have any safety folks in here that can help me with this, there was an act called Occupational Safety and Health Act. We know it today as OSHA. And that was 1972. That was the year I was born. So 46 years ago was when OSHA was enacted. What's that? He's like, I got underworld in you, Greg. So 1972, 46 years ago, we had a document that said, you shall be safe. So if I went to a job site, not to one of Benning's, a job site, right now, would I see unsafe acts occurring?
Absolutely.
Yes.
But wait a second, 1972 is 46 years ago. Why did
You can't
people do it?
legislate that problem out of existence.
You can't legislate it? It's a behavioral thing too. Are there companies that are just unsafe, that just don't get it?
Yes.
Regardless of what a book tells us to do for fall protection or safe excavations, there are people who just go, safety schmafety. I don't get it, doesn't make sense, and you could have dumb luck, albeit it's a horrible management philosophy, and luck your way through never having an accident. The reality is, good safety requires planning. You have to plan to be safe. Do you see any correlation here between operational excellence and safety?
Yes.
Do you have to plan to be operationally excellent? Which I think is a Bill and Ted thing, but yeah, the answer is you got to plan to be productive. You have to plan to be safe. So using our three-legged stool, when people say, do you want it safe or do you want it expediently? The answer is, I want it both. And you kind of go, well, you can't have it both ways. Oh, yes, I can. It can be done well because the connective tissue is how well we plan. Personal accountability outside of it, there are just people that go, I'm not wearing this stupid hard hat, it's hot. And you go, well, I mandated you wear a hard hat, so you have to wear a hard hat. I'm not doing it. I get it. There are people, that's good English, there are people that just don't do it. Do we hold them accountable? Accountable is a key word. I told a story the last time, I won't bore you with it, but just to say that steel erector that I mentioned a few moments ago, the one that did Little Caesars Arena, their accountability was awful. They had a project manager that lost $10 million on a job. He was kicked off that job. He then went to do another project where he lost $5 million. So if you're playing at home, at least he's getting better. He was kicked off that job, and I was at their office, and I ran into him when I was getting a cup of coffee. And I was kind of like seeing a ghost. I was like, geez, he's still here. So I went to the CEO and I said, Dwayne, why is Dwayne still here? And he said, Greg, we don't really have any processes or tools. So how do you hold someone accountable when we didn't set them up for success? So it's kind of hard to, manage that whole process overall. The answer is, he's kind of right. When there is no cookbook, no Starbucks way, how do you know if the cup of coffee is made wrong? Well, you just kind of stumble on it. And they couldn't hold people accountable because they didn't have any processes. But they didn't have any processes, so they couldn't hold people. You see the conundrum that we've created right now. The point is, all of these things require management. I have a pretty longer list here. I'm sure some of these things might resonate with you. There are still competitors out there, competitors to betting, that will work for wages. What do you think I mean by that? Work for wages.
Still profit.
Exactly. They act like there's never going to be another project. So, remember that show, Name That Tune? That was a show back in the 70s, I believe. The idea, Name That Tune? Well, we'll build this Publix for $1 million. I'll do it for $900,000. And you go, oh, name that tune. Good luck. They act like they're never going to get another job. And what does that do to the industry, though? Meanwhile, what's happening to wages out there? Are wages going up? Yeah, people are asking for more money, so wages are going up, but costs, or that suppression from the customers, coming down. What about speed, complexity, and change? Is that pretty true right now? Yeah, projects are a heck of a lot more complex than they were years ago. Historically, strong sectors have disappeared. I have clients that were doing a certain type of work. Long story short, they were building cassettes and CD factories. Well, we don't really get CDs anymore. It's all digital music. My point is, are we keeping up with what's going on in the marketplace? Are we building? I know you guys keep your finger on the pulse, but movie theaters, for instance. I've had this conversation with Channing many times. The movie theater experience has changed dramatically. When I was in high school, I worked in a movie theater for 4 years. I was an usher and a popcorn person. And I can tell you, the way it was then to the way it is now, because they had to evolve their business, is betting staying up and keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. Competition is double or triple. I know the poor quality of documents. You guys have perfect engineers and architects, right? No problem. Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Aggressively bid projects, they have to be produced aggressively. There's that workforce again, customer demands, technology, price pressure, labor overruns. Folks, the list and the culmination here is simply to say this. At the end of the day, I want to focus on what betting can control and what they can influence. That's it. Some of the stuff is noise. If the U.S. government decides to institute tariffs on the steel business, I don't have a lot of control on what happens there. It may or be good or maybe bad, I don't know. All I know is I can't control that. What do you control? You control the communication. That's in our power to do that. We control the planning, how jobs are in fact planned proactively. We're not doing the dump and go, we're doing it the betting systematic way. We influence the pace of work. We control the attitude. Yeah, you're going to have those folks that just go, oh man, they're lazy, they don't do it. But you know what? Have we all been part of that, we'll call it, issue? For instance, we have a couple millennials in the room. And I know we pick on the millennials. You know why we pick on the millennials?
They're new.
It's their turn. Exactly. Guess what? Gen X. Who are my Gen X people here? Born from like 1972 to I guess it was like right around 1980. It's a big swath. Guess what? We were in the barrel at some point in time too. People picked on us. We were the lazy ones. We didn't have a good work ethic. We couldn't be managed. Blah, 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 blah. And who picked on us? The baby boomers. Who are my baby boomers? Raise your hand here. Folks, you were the Hellraisers, you were at Woodstock smoking doobies and with the long hair and the hip, you were the same ones. You got picked on by the greatest generation. That's not my term for it, that's what they're called. They were the ones that goes, those are the Hellraisers, they don't have good work ethic. The point of the story is, guess what? Millennials, it's your turn in the center of the room. We get to pick on you. But they're an amazing group because they also do some things that the other groups just didn't do well. And millennials, it's going to be your turn soon because Gen Z is right around the corner. And you get to pick on them eventually. But how often have we been guilty of, they just don't want to work hard today? I would agree with some of that statement. There are definitely people that have entitlement problems. However, there are also plenty of people we just haven't reached yet. And we haven't found a way to think of them. In the last session, we talked about leading and managing people. If we manage people the same way that we were brought up, we're only going to hit a small group. The reason leadership and management is challenging is because it requires you to be thinking differently, managing people differently. You know, for instance, if you manage people and just throw money at the problem, and just say, you know what motivates me is more money in my paycheck every week. That's the only thing I care about is money, 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 money. The good news is, if this guy here is motivated by money, we're on the same wavelength. But that guy there is motivated by just getting an attaboy every now and again. This guy is motivated by being on complicated jobs. This guy right here, you know, he just wants to see things get done. He's very hands-on and likes to see everything come together. But if I manage by money, the only person I'm reaching is this guy here. When all he wanted was a, good job, man, way to go. How much different do we need to change? So managing and motivating are distinctly connected. The rhetorical question is, how well do you do at motivating your crews? Are you a good leader in that sense of the word? Do people feel inspired that work beneath you? Do you set direction, align your resources, and motivate others appropriately? Lastly, how well do you do at catching people doing things right? You're going to hear that theme come up a lot over the next couple months. So I'll just, spoiler alert, let you kind of see how that plays out. But how well do you personally do at catching people doing things right? That's how you manage the workforce. And then I mentioned the fact that the bandwidth. If this was my friend Jess, the one in Sarasota, that it's one guy, you know, the point is, he's one guy. He doesn't have the bandwidth. You are 120 to 125 people strong. So remember what I said at the beginning, the tools and processes which I'm going to show you next is going to require some Benningizing, which is a very fancy word. I want you to Benningize this. And we're going to go through some steps now to actually talk about how do we get better. So, we're going to talk first about processes, tools, and all throughout this, how do we hold people accountable? The reason I bring up accountability, it's because of this. I actually was working with a company, and I asked them about a processes and procedures. As this gentleman said, standard process and procedure, SOP if you prefer. Just saying the word SOP makes my skin crawl. And I'm sure like a lot of you, it's like, it's icky. That being said, the concept of SOP, this ops manager, I was in their office, and he said, Greg, we got that. And he did this. This was actually pretty funny. He goes to his shelf. He takes off a 3-ring binder off the shelf, and it was about one of those big 3-ring books, like about this big. He takes it off the shelf and he does this. Greg, we got the ops manual, and I just looked at him, I said, you must use that book quite a bit. He goes, oh no, we don't actually use this. And I said, then why do you have an SOP manual? He goes, because we have to. And I said, you're missing the point here. You know, we're not really coming at it the same way. Having processes is the recipe card for how we should all operate. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is, are our processes antiquated? are they not germane to the business we're doing? For instance, I was working with a company in Tennessee. They built prisons and schools. I don't know what the correlation between the two is, but that's what they're doing. However, when they started the business, they built highways and bridges. Yet they're still using the same process and procedures manual. And I said, guys, that doesn't make any sense. And they go, you're right, we're not using the process and procedures. So part of our problem is we changed our model. By the way, they used to do plan and spec work. Now they're doing design build work. Apples and oranges. That's like the Patriots using the Boston Red Sox playbook. If you say that doesn't seem like it makes sense, Greg, you're absolutely right. Why would they do that? So one of the first things we're going to talk about is process. And this is what I call a garden variety definition. Throughout this section, I want you to refer back to Benning. So all this has to be put in the Benning context. And think of where you are. Take the temperature of Benning, for instance. Say, do we have processes? So when we talk about management process, a collection of related structured activities or tasks that get some desired outcome. So what is a process? I should be able to teach it or train it internally. Once again, the Benning way, as you see here. Method or system that gets us consistent or desirable results. So the good news is we do X, Y, and Z, we get good change order management. We get profitable jobs. We get raving fan customers. It's documented, uniform, repeatable. You've heard me say the word best practice. So when I say Benning's best practices, those are the things that are your cookbook for success. Now, you might say, well, Greg, Benning didn't create pre-job planning. Benning didn't create post-job reviews, and you're absolutely right. However, what makes Benning different than other people is the fact that your cookbook has different steps in it. For instance, how come when I go to the supermarket and buy chocolate chip cookies, there are 30 different chocolate chip cookies in the cookie aisle? They should technically all taste the same, but they don't, but they're all called chocolate chip cookies. So when people are doing planning, there's the Benning, we'll call it the secret ingredient that's sprinkled in there. And it's the way Benning approaches it that allows that recipe to be different. And that's where we go back to this documented Benning way. And that last word probably should be in neon, bold letters. Proactive. I was talking with a client yesterday morning while I was in the airport before I got here, and I said, they said, Greg, you know, we don't want processes that are check-the-box processes. What do you think he meant by that? We don't want check-the-box processes. What do you think that means?
Just going through the motion.
Exactly. Pencil whipping a report. Yeah. Check. Got it. We're done. Yet, the part that it's missing is actually having good collaborative discussion, good strategy, actually having those discussions that hopefully those bullet points or check marks lead to the question. So for instance, what is our biggest concern on this project from a budget standpoint? Not that we talked about the budget, but force you to answer those questions. What sub do we think is our biggest risk on this project? What project are you on right now, sir?
Holland Point.
What are you building there?
It's a Publix and some retail.
Go figure. Where's Holland Point? What state?
Buford.
Okay. So what is your biggest concern on that project from a subcontractor? If you had to put a warning star on one sub, who would it be?
Statesboro.
I don't have Statesboro, I got Brothers. But, right now, it'd probably be either the testing agency or the painters.
Part of that discussion now is like, okay, the painters, I don't know who they are, let's call them ABC Painting. So the painters, what happens if they poop the bed on us? What are we going to do differently? What's our rock in the road? We identify the rock in the road, but what's our mitigation strategy? That's what all of these processes should have, is that not just the feeling of checking the boxes, but good discussion. As I said before, These are not dictations, these are collaborations. How do we make sure that we're collaborating on the right solution? What is a process not? It's not a binder where we knock the dust off like it's from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Top-down directives. Well, Rice said we should do this. Well, once again, is that the right thing? It's not a replacement for leadership or management. It's not exclusive to an individual. I hear it all the time. I have to have John Smith manage this project. The customer loves him. Okay. The question is, why does that customer love John Smith? I love hearing that people are in demand. Do you all have that where this person has to be on a Publix job because they love that guy? That's wonderful. The question you got to ask, why? Is it because he has a sterling personality that everyone just loves? Or does he... I think you have a sterling personality, by the way. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm busting your chops. Touche. No, all jokes aside, you know, I love it for that. That superintendent, that PM, just, they connect. You know, they have good chemistry. On the other hand, this is what I hear often. John just does it differently than those other superintendents. Aha! What is John doing differently than our other superintendents? Is he getting the Starbucks cup of coffee? Or is he making the Dunkin' cup of coffee in the Starbucks cup itself? Does that make sense to everybody? You know, I'm okay if you have good chemistry with a client. If you're doing it that different than everybody else at Benning, that's when we have to say, how do we make sure everyone does it his way? Because there's something there. That's the secret to the sauce. Additionally, it's not undocumented, stagnant, verbal, poorly communicated. Or lastly, any way we do something, as long as we're making money, we're okay with that. Give you, for instance, I have a natural gas client I work with. They're out west in Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. They were making 19% net profit. So unlike my Tennessee friends that had margin erosion, they were making 19% net profit, which is a lot of money, folks. Well, here's the story. 19% net, I would go in there and say, well, let's talk about productivity. Let's talk about operations. And they'd go, 19%? We don't care, Greg. We're perfectly fine. We make more money than any other company in our area. So this is a waste of time. They were fat, dumb, and happy. I think it just described me, actually. They just simply were making money, and there's a word for it called complacent. However, the part that you're missing of the story is this was pre-recession. So they were making money, and if you heard the states that I mentioned, it was a license to print money. If you were going to put natural gas distribution systems in, they were handed a blanket contract. That's what they were called, blanket contracts. Go build this subdivision. And they'd say, okay, and it was all done T&M at 19% net profit. Well, the interesting part of this whole discussion was the only rule they had was don't blow up the neighborhood. And I'm not making it up. That was the only rule. Just be safe and don't kill people. And then the market shifted. How competitive do you think these guys were? When they had to start bidding projects, let's just say stuff got real at that point in time. Because they started having to look at their cost structure, and they were so bloated and inefficient. I mean, it was this big tub of goo that just couldn't move. And that's where they got hurt. So the moral story is, when we just accept any way or any person in our organization, well, John must be doing things, let's not upset the apple cart. Hey, I want to know what John's doing. Let's kind of figure out that secret to the sauce, because we need to make everybody else institutionally smart. So we have our processes from the time that a job is kicked off to the time we mobilize. What happens during that process? That's the process itself. Within that process, there are tools. As my friend up here said, standardized processes and procedures. I like standardized process and tools because now, what are the Benning tools? What do the Benning cups of coffee look like? For instance, what does our pre-job planning meeting kickoff look like? Do we have one Benning version of a meeting agenda? Or do we have 20 different? You don't have to answer that. But how many different versions are there? For instance, I had a client, I asked them to bring in change order proposals. Not the change orders that you would put in, was it AS300 or Viewpoint or anything like that. This is actually the change order proposal that gets written up and sent to the customer, COP if you prefer. And I asked all their PMs, they had like 8 PMs, and I asked them to bring every copy into the conference room. There were 8 people in the room, and there were 12 different versions of the change order proposals. And I said, how did we get here? And folks, don't give me this, oh, it depends on the customer, and Publix has their own version. This had nothing to do with that, folks. Some people had their own little spreadsheet, their own little gimmicks, and every project they would invent a new spreadsheet or a new gimmick or a new tool. That's what I'm referring to here, folks. How many different versions of Benning tools are there? Now, you probably are sitting there saying to yourself, wow, Greg, you sound like the thought police. We're all going to have to do it the Benning way. Well, there's something to be said about that. How do you get there? We're not that far apart. I would guarantee you this. I got to see inside your organization. You're a lot closer than you probably think. But how hard is it for a new person? I know this gentleman is relatively new because I met you on your second day. How hard is it for someone to come in as a newbie and learn the Benning system? Well, you came from another company before, so you're bringing your old ways. It starts to sound like that NFL, the Redskins we mentioned before. Bring in a lot of free agents, great free agents, talented athletes, gifted managers. But what happens? We bring them in and now we start to create the differences. Well, in my old company, this is what we used to do. And I'm not saying you're saying this, by the way. When I was brought up, this is how we did it. And now we create the variations. Does that make sense to everybody? So some of the tools, I'm not going to read the list to you, but you can see the different iterations of things. And I know you're migrating to the right way, more towards that middle. But when I ask people this, they'll say, Greg, don't be bringing all that process stuff in here. For instance, you mentioned New Mexico, you and I talked about this. My client is right on Route 66 by UNM. And they actually, they call themselves the Renegades. Not the name of the company, I want to be clear. But all their PMs go, Greg, we have kind of a renegade mentality here. We're like cowboys here in New Mexico, like the OK Corral. And I said, that's a crock of crap if I've ever heard one. That is an excuse for not having an accountability system in place. Look, I don't think I'm the thought police in any way, shape, or form when I say, have the same agenda. For instance, my friends from Green Bay I mentioned, they do stadiums, food and dairy, hospitals, and commercial construction. That's their kind of niche markets. And when I said do pre-job planning, they said to me, Greg, we're just so different here. Look at all the things we do. We do so many different things. I said, okay, Mr. Food and Beverage guy, do you have plans? Yeah. I said, okay, stadium guy, do you have plans? Yeah. Do you have a budget? Yeah. You have a budget too, right? Yeah. Do you have a customer? You get my point. At the end of the day, we went through what we considered a standard agenda. The discussion on the other side of this equation was different. The discussion point of this whole thing was, hey, let's figure out how to manage the budget effectively. Let's figure out how to manage the plans and the horrible documents we have. And let's work through that stuff rather than necessarily creating a new agenda every single time. At the end of the day, we ended up with a category in the bottom that said special stuff for food and beverage, special stuff for hospitals, because they had ACA for the safety for infection control. Over here, we had food and beverage, we had the FDA. Okay, those are two different things. But 90% of the list was the same for every project. The same with you guys. I don't care if I'm building a Publix or a movie theater. At the end of the day, they are the same things. The outcome is going to look differently, and they're all going to have, the discussion should be centered around project-specific problems. So, that's what this looks like, which brings us to what we refer to as the bookmark. This is actually going to be where we're going to spend the lion's share of our time this morning. This part of the process, when you think about these 5 items on this circle, I like to equate it all back to football. Because obviously, big football fan, particularly college, and I'm going to use this example over and over. So let's go back to our Patriots from a little bit earlier today. The Patriots actually, when they played in the Super Bowl, it was a pretty boring Super Bowl, I might add. There were 2 weeks from the last playoff game till the actual Super Bowl itself. I guess the first question I want to ask you is, how much football was actually played in the Super Bowl?
60 minutes.
This gentleman said 60 minutes. Does anyone agree or disagree with that?
Probably about 15 minutes total.
Wow, you're a lot different than this guy.
Well, by the time they stop for commercials and they have their huddles and their timeouts and the actual playing times, not that.
4 15-minute quarters. That's 60 minutes.
Yeah. But
However,
playing time.
he's reading between the lines there, and actually you're both right. Yes, there's 60 minutes on the clock, 4 15-minute quarters. However, the question asked is how much football is played. And the answer is, this has actually been studied, there's actually 12 to 13 minutes of actual playing time. That's physically hiking the ball and then executing a play, a run or a pass or a kickoff or something like that. The most of the time in football is spent doing what? Setting up and planning.
Yeah.
What is a huddle? A huddle is a planning. Halftime is planning. The 2-minute warning in pro football it is planning. Timeouts are planning. Well, that's all planning, folks, for 12 to 13 minutes. Now, I know a lot of you have your spouses under the ruse that football lasts from Thursday till Monday, and we'll keep them under that ruse. That's pretty good. However, if they